the Learner Center Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Martin, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation today with Babak Mostaghimi. Babak is a father, education systems entrepreneur, strategic advisor, and at home, he's an outdoorsman, avid gardener, and backyard chicken farmer. At work, he serves as a founding partner at Learner Studio and formerly the assistant superintendent of elementary education and student support for Gwinnett County Public Schools. There, he focused on preparing children for their future through programs focused on early learning and artificial intelligence and everything in between, which I'm so excited to get into today. He began his education career as a fifth grade teacher in Shelby, Mississippi, where he was the 2008 District Teacher of the Year and Mississippi Teacher of the Year nominee. He holds a doctorate in educational leadership and master's in public policy from Harvard, and a bachelor's degree in economics and international relations from Johns Hopkins. So excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining me.
Katie, thanks for having me. And I appreciate the kind introduction. I'm just a regular guy trying to do good work in the world.
And that's what I appreciate about you. You have such rich background, and your humility in the way you enter the space to think about what's possible is something that we can all learn from. So we're going to dive in a little bit. I read your bio and all the things, but I want to know a little bit more about who you are and what are some of the experiences that shaped you as the leader you are today.
Sure, that's a great question. Who am I? Especially on a day like today, it really makes you wonder, right? So I'm Babak. My family is Iranian. They came to the United States as refugees fleeing religious persecution. But I was born in the US and grew up in rural Virginia. And was an Eagle Scout and did all sort of the go out to the river on a Friday night with a bottle of Coke and a fire and have some fun sort of guy. And then I went to undergrad to study actually international relations and economics with the idea of becoming like a counterterrorism, like a defense guy. And I actually did that for a little bit. But there came this moment where I was really asking the question of, are we doing enough for the country that we're trying to defend to make sure that it itself is really good, that it's treating everybody fairly, that it's just in how it's doing its work. And so to sort of explore that, I ended up doing TFA and ended up in rural Mississippi, and it fundamentally changed my life. I went from working on $1 billion contract to not having enough chairs in my classroom for kids. And it fundamentally changed how I saw the world and what we needed to do in it. And so from there, literally was all right, we got to do something. So was a teacher and then realized my kids leave me and are not as well off as when they were with me. And so I need to do something bigger. And so got a public policy degree, went back to Mississippi, was a community organizer and trying to figure out how do we support schools and stuff that way, help found a charter school, and then started looking even bigger because I'm these all sit in an even bigger structure. And so next thing I know, I'm getting a doctorate and I end up here in Gwinnett County, which is where I'm sitting on my porch right now, and trying to tackle for 180,000 kids, what does future readiness look like and how do we prepare for AI long before we were actually having AI conversations, right? And so yeah, so I'm a little bit of everything. And right now I'm sitting on my porch in Georgia, and as you said, I have 11 chickens out back, up from 10 because we got a foster chicken the other day. I have an orchard out front. I have a couple of my own kids, a couple of kids we took in, and just a lot of really good stuff going on.
I love that. And such a interesting picture in the way that you see the world from, wanting to do good and wanting to make an impact, and the different vantage points that you're able to see is important. And every time I often feel the same way, my classroom, I thought that was my world. And then you step out and you see the difference in classrooms and opportunities and experiences, and just that desire to want to make it amazing for all kids, I think is something that we share.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think the one thing I've learned is any job can be done in the spirit of service.
Mhm.
And any job can be done in the spirit of just making money for yourself. And I think throughout my journey, what I've seen is so many great people, from literally the cashier at a store to people who are superintendents who are doing their job with a spirit of service. And it just it shows up different. Like it has a different impact when you do it that way, no matter what you're doing, no matter what job you have, no matter what thing you're working on. And so that's what I try and bring to the work myself. I'm like, hey, like let's what happens if we imagine this as like a service to the world and like trying to make the world a better place in some capacity.
Yeah, and you can do that in many ways. And as a mom, I often think about like, what is that path and how do I help my own kids figure out who they are and their gifts and how they can work in a job or a career or something that does give them a sense of joy and a place to be of service rather than just doing a job. Because
Yeah.
life is so much richer when you can do things with purpose and joy.
Yeah, I read somewhere that it's like everybody's always searching for the answers to like three questions. And those are like, who are you? To what purpose do you exist?
Mhm.
And what does good mean? Like, what does it mean to be good? And like, if you can answer those questions for yourself, then you end up in like able to build a very aligned life that sort of works where you're serving the world and doing great things. And whenever we can't answer one of those questions, it sort of gets us off track a little bit. And not that the answers are always the same, right? They
Right.
evolve over time as you grow and things, but yeah, I think it's really interesting whether you're a like a 9 year old like my daughter or almost about to graduate or in your 30s or 40s, you're always answering those same three questions over time.
I like that. I am going to put those three questions, I think, on my computer so I can just see them and come back to them. That makes a lot of sense. So I think you might have answered this, but I'm thinking about like, so you're a gardener, chicken farmer, foster, chickens, and like you said, your kids, community builder. How have those experiences and how you go about that work informed your philosophy about how we can really create and sustain change in education?
Sure. I would say that I almost approach everything I do as a gardener. And so if you think of it like you plant like a tree, for example, and you're going to wait at least 5 or 6 years before you get any fruit from it, right? And sometimes the tree dies in the middle, right? Because you didn't do something right, or a freak storm happens, or whatever, which is why you plant more than one tree, right? And then sometimes when you start getting the fruits, you realize, oh, shoot, this is a different tree than what I thought I had planted, right? And then every once in a while, you get really cool surprises where not only have you planted a tree, but you've also planted like the compost you used to plant it sprouted some stuff. So like this year, I got a bunch of pumpkins. I've never planted pumpkins, but like we got them. They're great. We feed them to the chickens. We use them ourselves for stuff, right? And so I think for me, I really approach learning and education and like innovation as like a gardener, where you're like, hey, let me plant seeds. You're strategic about it. You're planting them carefully, but you're also like ready and open to the aha moments, the when, oh, like I didn't know that was a fruit that I wanted, or hey, here's the fruit that I got and it's not very good. It's like not the thing I wanted. So what do I do with that tree or with that plant, right? And like how are you like kind and caring to the world around you? Like for us, like I don't like I'm not a big like organic guy generally, but like in my own yard, I'm like I don't spray pesticides. Like I don't do any of that stuff. I like find other ways to mitigate pests in order to sort of like create a more natural environment and those sorts of things. And we find ways of regenerating everything, right? From like a tree got struck by lightning, cut it up, made it into wood, use the wood for a fire, that fire which we used to cook. The ash from the wood was used for the chickens who love to bathe in it. After they're done with it, is used as compost, and then like that compost is used for another tree, right? And so I think similarly in education, I'm always thinking of how do we sort of work within our environment, work with the land, not against it, right? How do we figure out those great seeds that are already in the soil, those amazing teachers, those amazing ideas, the things that we can just nourish and grow further, rather than like the sort of clear cut method of like, oh, I'm the new boss in town. I'm going to level all the trees and we're going to start fresh. And it's like you don't ever get old growth forests by doing that, right? So yeah, so I'd like to approach things in that way. And then I think on the community side of things, I learned a lesson really early on when I was in Mississippi as a community organizer, and I was like a young hotshot. Went into a neighborhood and like there's a ton of dilapidated housing. And so we were doing a community organizing project, and I was like, clearly the first project we need to work on is like getting more money for housing and infrastructure in. And people were like, Bahak, like slow down, like let's see what everybody wants. And I was like, well, clearly that's what they're gonna want. So we ended up having a whole community meeting the housing thing didn't even come up until like item number 12 on the list. And like item number one was like, we want our trash picked up. Item number two was like, we want our streetlights fixed. And then people weren't even willing to go to the housing thing until those things got taken care of. And that made me realize like throughout everything you do, you really have to empathize and like kind of run design thinking processes all the time with like, what do kids want? What do teachers want? What does your community want? And then how do you build from there as opposed to I am the genius with it. Like I can see everything and, do what I want, sort of perspective. So yeah, so a lot of different things that how it impacts me.
I love that so much. Just the idea of like building on what is and also not just being stuck with what is, right? Seeing like
Yeah,
where do you need to bring in some new ideas? Where do you need to test some things and cultivate those ideas and those people? And as you're talking about the community, like I see that in schools all the time, right? They're like, oh, we just need to fix this. We just need a new curriculum instead of like, no, no, no. I actually just want a different schedule so that I can actually organize my time with kids differently. And being able to understand what are the issues that people feel most passionate about
yeah.
from their day-to-day life is so important than like your top-down sort of ideas of what people need.
Yeah, and like the entire like the environment that something is in really matters, right? And so like I could be the perfect tree planter, but if we get a hard freeze before that thing is ready and I haven't covered it up and protected it, like that's it. Like that's gone. It doesn't matter how great of a tree planter I was, right? And so like as you're thinking about like building things with people and like moving the world forward, you got to really think about like what's the broader environment, what's the sort of layers of protection that I need to create for something to thrive. And then also the hardest part as a gardener is, and this tears me up every single year, is when you like plant sort of plants from seed, you're oftentimes planting one or two seeds together, and you're supposed to cull the seeds that aren't like performing as well, right? With this idea of like out of the three seeds, one is going to thrive and you're going to make it work. I used to always just like leave them there all together, and then you get almost nothing because they all suck the same nutrients in the same water, and you end up getting failure to thrive all the way across. And I only recently, honestly, in the last 2 years, realized, oh, like if I actually take out those other plants to make space for the thing that's working, like really great things can happen. And so like similarly in the education space, we oftentimes just like add so much. We like, let's add one more seed, let's add one more thing. And we're like never asking the question of what do we need to stop doing? What are the things that we need to stop, like create space for so that we actually have the time to do the things that really matter? So yeah, so many analogies, like overall, it's kind of crazy.
It
Yeah,
is. I really love that. And I've been thinking a lot about that same idea. Like, there's a lot of, we were talking before we even started recording, a lot of amazing teachers, right? Amazing
yeah,
leaders. Like, there's programs, there's these bright spots, so to speak, all over the place. But often it's revolving around this heroic teacher who is like doing all the things or going above and beyond, working 8, 10, 12 hours all summer. And instead of thinking about like, okay, what is the system we need to create and how do we create the conditions for everyone to do this job more effectively and be able to have the time to plan and work together and collaborate rather than one teacher per classroom or the way we've designed it. And I just think that's an example of like we can't keep adding things that
yeah.
are, really sucking the system dry instead of like redefining kind of what that space looks like.
Yeah, for sure. The former superintendent in Gwinnett, a great guy named J. Alvin Wilbanks, who was a mentor of mine early on. He brought me to work on innovation for the system, and he had this thing where he'd always talk about like think about systems, structures, processes, and people. And he always said, I would rather have a mediocre person in an amazing system and structure because they will do incredible things than a remarkable person in a terrible system, structure, or process because they will do worse than the mediocre person. And so he would always say, before you blame the person, look at the system, look at the process, look at the things that they're being forced to do, the incentive structures, and work on those before being like, no, this person needs to leave or whatever. Which I think too often we try and point fingers at a person, not realizing, hey, that person is doing what they're doing because of the environment, because of the ecosystem around them.
Right. That resonates a ton. And, when we have a system that's not serving all kids and we see the data points all over the place around disengagement, around, families leaving, confidence in schools, teachers unhappy with the profession, we have to stop blaming people and start thinking about what are the systems that are incentivizing and are making sure that these outcomes stay the same year after year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about Gwinnett a little bit. So your work was really around like AI, future readiness, also early childhood. What are some of the ways that you supported? Like you were talking about AI, like you said, before this was really mainstream. How did that start, and how did you rally a community around this future ready work?
Yeah, so one of the big sort of animating things of Gwinnett that made it really, really a wonderful place to work was this like concentration on this idea that we should always know what our core business is. And our core business, we realized early on, which a lot of people would frame it as like teaching and learning is the core business, but really teaching and learning was the core activity, right?
Mhm.
The core business was actually something deeper than that, and it was preparing kids for their future. And so, with that frame, early on, Mr. Wilbanks, the superintendent at the time, brought me on with the sort of frame of like, hey, I think Gwinnett County Public Schools, which has just won 2 road prizes and all that sort of stuff, really effective system. He's like, I think we might be Blockbuster and Netflix is coming. And he's like, I need somebody to help us figure out what our system for innovation is to make sure that we are our own Netflix, that we are always pushing towards preparing every kid for their future, right? And so within that frame, back in like 20, literally is December 2017, I'm like reading about the world, trying to figure out, okay, if we're preparing kids for their future, what's their future going to be like? And we realized, oh my gosh, there's a lot of automation stuff that's happening. There's like this emerging AI stuff. Like generative AI wasn't like a thing people were talking about yet, but there are like estimates that by 2035, AI was going to be a big thing, right? And so this is 2017. We sort of get together and we're like, look, we think if we start now, we'll be able to make sure our entire system is ready by 2035, right? But then we also started saying, we also think there's like something in the water that's making this go faster than we anticipated.
Mhm.
And so we should probably not aim for 2035, but aim for a little bit earlier. So we aim for like 2030, right? Like, okay, looking back, it's kind of like hysterical because you're like, oh, not 2030, like
Well, you're
20,
still ahead of many systems,
I mean,
so
fair, right? Like 20, we were like 2022 is really how it turned out, right? But what we started doing was by asking that question of how do we like prepare young people for their future, right? It sort of shifted everything in our minds because it made it so the kindergarten teacher's job was no longer teaching kindergarten. It was preparing that kid. Like I want to say if you're in kindergarten right now, you'll graduate in like 2036, right? 13 years from now, 2038, something like
yeah,
that, right?
2030, yeah.
And so we're like, actually, the job of the kindergarten teacher is preparing them for that.
Yep.
And when we started, and then same with the first grade, second grade, third grade, like all the way up, right? And not just like in terms of jobs, but like life in general. Like, are we giving them the collaboration skills, the creativity skills, the problem solving skills, all that sort of stuff? And what we realized was very, very quickly, we're like, we are in some places by accident doing that, but we aren't doing it at scale by design for every single kid. And so we started looking at like, okay, what does this look like? And in that process, we sort of discovered 2 things at the same time. One was that we needed to look at what is like an AI readiness sort of like strategy and like way of embedding it across all learning. And AI readiness, not just as the tools, but as like the preparation for a world where these tools exist, right? Like being able to know yourself, being able to be creative and a problem solver, so that as these tools shift, you'll know what to do with them and how to relate to them and build them and all that sort of stuff. But we also discovered in Gwinnett at the same time, and it was like all happening all at once, right? That our kids were entering kindergarten unprepared for our curriculum. And it wasn't just some kids, it was like 52% of kids weren't coming in ready. And it was based on our own, we had an internal tool we developed to measure this. Our benchmark was 70%. So we weren't even like 100% ready, right? Had we gone to 100%, I'm sure that number would have dropped to like, or to like 75% not being ready for kindergarten, right? And so, knowing what we know about the impact of kindergarten on lifelong outcomes, we're like, hey, we need to build an entire community initiative from about around birth to 5, including pre-K and those sorts of things, but way before pre-K, right? And then essentially align all the way up through the system so that you have a like a coherent approach to future ready learning at scale. And so yeah, so we did everything. We're like, imagine we're trying to this, the pandemic is happening during this. We decide, like with everything else, like, hey, it's already hard. You might as well do the hard stuff now. We were doing like pilots of like cool AI things and things like that during the pandemic. And then once we were able to get back in person, we just hit the ground running because we realized, oh, this is happening really fast. By the time our AI themed high school opened, which was the first one in the country, our like I think the November after it opened, we did like an opening ceremony and stuff, and I used ChatGPT to do my speech. So that was like the thing to do, right?
Yep.
No one had ever heard of ChatGPT in the room at that time, right? And we were just like, oh, thank goodness that we had made this bet early. And we have a lot more work to do, right? Like it wasn't like you're done, sort of a deal. It was
Right.
like, here's what we're learning and here's how we're going to spread it to the whole system. Um, but yeah, so it's just been quite a journey.
Fascinating. So a few things that I want to just like double click on. One, I you said it casually, but I don't think enough people understand the core business of education or are aligned on it, right? Many people still think it's teaching and learning and get very stuck on like I need to teach kindergarten or science or math,
Yeah.
and what you said is preparing even kindergartners, young people, right, for their future. And when you were talking, I was thinking like 2015, I remember the slides from World Economic Forum that, I
Yeah.
was like putting up and, hey guys, this is coming. We need to be thinking about this. And everyone's like, oh yeah, sure, it's coming. And we could not imagine it, right? Like this idea of automation and the idea that we need kids to be critical thinkers and we need them to be able to discern if something is real or not. And people hear it, but like with the advent of, generative AI, it's starting to really disrupt people's thinking in a way that we hadn't been able to see prior. So I'm really grateful, and it's cool to see you in the system, in a large system in Gwinnett, being able to
Yeah.
think about that. The other thing you said is that coming back from the pandemic, you were able to hit the ground running in a forward looking path. When I think too many of our systems, even those that were innovative and
Yeah.
forward thinking, really reverted back to the normal and what was before, and trying to do school harder than
Yeah.
really think about it differently because it was so destabilizing. And the easiest thing to do was like just go back to the structures that we know. and and those are breaking left and right now as we see.
Well,
And so a lot of people are like, what do we do now?
yeah, totally. Well, I mean, and the thing, like on the first part around like the shift to teaching and learning as like not the core business, but the like preparing kids for the future as a core business, that was like a straight up play from Blockbuster Video that we learned, where it's like Blockbuster Learning forgot, or sorry, Blockbuster Video forgot that its core business wasn't a corner store video store. It was entertainment, right? And that's what Netflix capitalized on, right? And then Netflix capitalized on that in multiple other ways too, where it cannibalized its own DVD business with the streaming business, started cannibalizing some of its own streaming business with like the new content that they were creating for themselves, like all the new like Netflix shows, right? And then the only time they've started faltering is now when they like don't know what that next thing is, right? And that's why now people have multiple video streaming services typically, where before we used to be like Netflix or bust, right?
Right.
And like so I think it's interesting if we look around us, we sort of intuitively know that we should care about not the activities of the business, but what the business is trying to accomplish as the goal. But because we're so focused on improving the activities all the time, it's easy to lose that focus, right? And then when you make that shift, it makes it so that when you're in a moment of a pandemic, or post pandemic, you can actually go, oh, our core business isn't improvement on the old things.
Mhm.
It's like always pushing forward on what do the kids need now, right? And I think our big challenge in post pandemic wasn't just that we went back to doing things the way they were, because we actually didn't. We actually went back even further. than
We
what
did.
it was like. Like we went probably 15 years back further in terms of like rote curriculum memorization, like everyone being on the exact same page every day. Like I don't like it's almost like we had amnesia around what we had learned up until the beginning of the
Right.
pandemic.
Well, everyone freaked out, right? We have learning loss and kids have they're so far behind and we got so stuck on these like old metrics that yeah, it freaked everyone out. Um so part of that is, we go through the pandemic, we come back and people are stuck on all the things that they're learning and we have to get back to the basics. And
Yeah,
yet we still see the world just moving so fast. So how did you in Gwinnett and more broadly, how are you
yeah.
helping people think about yes, kindergarten kids need to learn how to read, and we need to think more broadly about their future. And like, so how do you help people understand that those two things are not contradictory?
Yeah.
They need to be in service of one another.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think right now we have this like false debate
Hmm.
over whether you need to know stuff, i.e. content, or if you need to like know how to apply that content to stuff, right? And there are some people who are like, "Oh, knowledge is dead. Just go do the other thing. Like just go learn how to be creative and collaborative and problem solving and stuff." And then you have the other set who are like, "Only knowledge. That other stuff doesn't matter. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out later." And what we realize is that like employers, parents and families, everybody is telling us we need both,
Hmm.
right? And so it's crazy not to do both, right? And the idea isn't that like the challenge of school has often been focused on the what rather than the how. And I actually think you can do the what in a new how and a new way that makes it feel completely different, allows you to gain that core competency and like the core knowledge that you need at the same time as building the skills for the future that you deeply need, right? Now, at the same time, like I think there are pieces where we need to modernize what we're teaching, right? And like when I was in Gwinnett, I'm a big whiteboard guy. Like I love whiteboards. Whenever I'd move into an office, I'd get free whiteboards from that had been like taken out of old buildings, and I'd get them put up on all four walls. I'd remove all bookshelves, all that sort of stuff, because for me it was a waste of space. And at the top of the whiteboard, the first thing I'd always write is, "What is the new Latin?" And by that, I didn't mean that Latin's not a good thing, right? But there was a point in our history where we thought if you didn't know Latin, you're like uneducated and you will make it nowhere in life, right? And then there's a point where we realize actually, like, you're going to be okay. Like, not that Latin's a bad thing to learn. There are people learn it who love it. It's like, leave it alone. Like, I'm not saying destroy Latin, right? But I don't know if Latin needs to be required for every kid in the entire country all the time, right? I think similarly, like, we kind of already believe this because if you go into almost any district, you have like power standards, and those
Hmm.
power standards are different than like the broader standard set. And so people have already realized, wait a minute, like you don't actually need to know this whole binder of curriculum.
You can't
Like
actually
you
know
can't.
all of that, right? It is like impossible to do that. So we're already shrinking them in different places.
But we're like doing that in a non-strategic way. Like we're doing, and we're only doing it about content, and we're not actually designing for those like human skills that young people need, right? And so, like the cool thing that's happened now, so I made the transition to Learner Studio as a founding partner a little over a year and a half ago now. And what we're doing at Learner Studio is trying to address that challenge. Like, okay, what does a new learning system look like
Hmm.
that enables you to have foundational modernized content knowledge, like that domain knowledge, and these like deeply and even more important human skills than ever built together in environments that are like active, deeply engaging for young people and like highly preparatory for whatever future that they choose.
Hmm.
And it's been awesome. Like it's so much fun because at the end of the day, like people already agree with you. They
Yeah.
are just trying to figure out how to do it. And then how to change the systems around them that prevent them from doing that.
Right. And back to your systems, right? There's like great teachers who want to do this work, but they've also been educated in a No Child Left Behind era
Yep.
and don't have a lot of these skills or are able to exercise them in the current systems in which they are teaching. And so you have a high schooler that I know very well who is spending her time reading the Scarlet Letter as a whole class and writing copious notes, pages and pages and pages, and recalling facts from a very old book. And like this is still the core of like English in high
Yeah.
school.
Well, and like, yeah, and for me, I'm like, again, like, I'm not opposed to the Scarlet Letter. Like, lovely story, really great meaning you can make from it, and those sorts of things. But to your point, I don't think every single kid has to read that. And if they don't read it and take copious notes, that somehow they've failed and aren't ready for their future, right? But
Right.
what I do believe is there are lessons you can learn in many different ways, right? Like one of the sort of classic examples is recently there's been a resurgence of people who are very pro cursive, right? And so like there are a couple states that have now like re-required cursive where it had kind of gone away. And I might be a little biased here because I never learned cursive. I actually switched schools between third and fourth grade. The school that I went to in fourth grade taught cursive in third, and the school that I was coming from taught it in fourth. And so I literally just missed it by accident. And like I'm more or less okay, right? Like I don't cry myself to sleep at night. Like I think I was all right academically without knowing cursive, right? But then there's some people like no, cursive builds your brain in particular ways, and they're totally right. But so does like playing the cello or the violin. So does like so many other creative experiences. So like yes to forming those parts of the brain, and you can form those in many different ways.
Right. And that goes back to the bigger picture of like, and same thing with the Scarlet Letter. Reading to me, as a former language arts teacher, reading is very important. Every kid should be reading books. They also should be reading books that they choose and that they connect with. And
Yeah.
if we level up from this is the thing we have to teach you without understanding why or the end goal and backwards designing from that, we end up
Yep.
just doing a bunch of tasks rather saying, we want kids to be able to like read something, discern information, make connections, apply it to the broader context, be able to communicate their ideas. Like those are all the standards. And instead, we've reduced it to a book is the way that this happens, and then make everyone march through chapter by chapter. And we actually don't get to those bigger skills in most cases.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, you can. I think if we trust our gut, when you go into an amazing classroom, even an amazing classroom that's teaching the Scarlet Letter, the way they deliver it is one that is immersive, connecting for kids to real life, and builds those big skills while also doing the content.
Mhm.
Like that's why when you walk into a classroom, like I don't want to leave. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that the classroom, like I've had that happen in a lecture classroom before. I've had it happen in a really highly project-based classroom before. But it's just like the design of the learning experience has gotten to the core business of preparing kids for their future. And when they feel that, they engage, they'll show up, like
Mhm.
they're not putting their heads down, like all that sort of stuff, because they're like, oh yeah, like it might be the Scarlet Letter, but I understand why I'm reading this because it has something to do with society and how the world works. And anyways, like so again, it's like not about the what, it's like how we're thinking about the what and what it's connected to and all those sorts of things.
So as we think about this and think about the like those broader skills, this like backwards designing from this world 2035 that is here right now, and
Yeah.
like my god, what's 2035 going to look like now? um where AI is changing things so quickly. So what are some of the like let's start with some of the misconceptions that you hear from people out there about AI between, students and families, and it's this like we have the camp that is like, let's ignore it. I don't want to talk about it. And those that
Yeah.
are like, I'm all in, let's go. What what's your read on what's happening out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everything else, you need to have a balanced approach, right? The challenge with the pendulum swinging is that it swings really hard to one side or the other. It
Hmm.
very rarely stops in the middle where you get like just a balanced approach, right? And like I think with AI, like we shouldn't be ignoring it, nor should we think that it's everything to everyone and center it, right? So like the things that scare me are people who are like, we should have like an AI centered schools. I'm like, no, like that doesn't make sense. That's just as bad as having classroom centered schools.
Hmm.
Like anything that's not centering the kid, you've like missed the point of school, right?
100%.
And so there are a lot of people who are like all about the technology. What does the technology do? And this, and I'm like, actually, it's a tool, right? It's a tool that should be used by humans for humans to do great things, right? So I think one of the great misconceptions is that, oh, we should put all our eggs in the AI basket. And by that, they mean on the tools and focusing on the tools, prepping kids on the tools, all that sort of stuff, as opposed to a combination of that and building the deeply human skills that are necessary for the future. And honestly, the big reason for that is those tools are changing every 5 seconds, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, imagine training a kindergartner on Chat GPT. This thing's not going to exist like by the time they're in high school. Like, the chat interface is going to go away, all those sorts of things. I think a second big thing that's going on right now, which is fascinating, is like there's a set of people who are like, we are going to totally ignore AI and we're going to like triple down on a classical model of education,
Mhm.
right? Which, like, at its core, a really great classical model, it's not a bad thing, right? But I'd argue that most of the people that are saying that, what they actually mean is we're going to have discrete subjects with kids sitting in rows quietly in a classroom reading out of a book in a standardized format, right? Where a real classical education would be one where you're like almost one-on-one with a tutor, exploring the things that really matter through the perspectives of a bunch of different subjects and those sorts of things, right? And I think the thing that we fail on there, which also there's like a set of people who are like, you have to do the basics first. So, which means like, oh, you have to do reading and writing and math first. And then once we figure those out, we'll like teach AI and other stuff.
Which we never get to.
That's the problem. Like, A, we never get there. And so what you end up with is like, unfortunately, typically poorer, blacker, browner kids, rural kids, like kids in poverty, et cetera, never having access to the understanding of what the latest technologies are, what that means for them, how that can change their own lives, how they can leverage and create technologies to change the world, all that sort of stuff. The other thing that it misses is that these tools can actually help us better deliver those core skills that we want, right? And I don't just mean by having the tool deliver it, but just like the engagement that happens when a kid is like building a tool in Play Lab, like that fundamentally changes your desire to learn things, which
Mhm.
then we know is like the key to unlocking learning, right? Like when somebody wants to learn something, they will learn it. Like it doesn't matter what else you throw up in their way, right? And so like I just think there's that we're like missing something when we do that. So essentially the both extremes are highly problematic. And then the third thing that I think is interesting, and things have started changing on this, thankfully, is that there was a moment where people were really just talking about AI as either augmenting human capacity, meaning like adding on to what you already have,
Mhm.
or replacing it, i.e., like it's going to be your new teacher, right? And I think we're starting to make this shift towards the thing I've been talking about around calling it pro-human AI, which is this idea of actually, yes, fine to augment human capabilities and those sorts of things, but we should actually be building core human capabilities. We
Yes.
should make ourselves more creative, like more discerning,
Right.
better collaborators, all those sorts of things. And we can use AI to do that. And so I think there are too many people who are just like, assuming our human skills are where they are and like just like leave it alone and we'll build on top, as opposed to, hey, let's make ourselves better human beings with these tools.
Absolutely. Like, what are the core things that we can do as humans, and how do we really lean into those things? And whether it's in the classroom or in work in different places, like there's tools that can do things much faster and at a higher level, frankly,
Yeah.
than individual humans. So like let's focus on that and let's use the tools in those ways, and then and yeah, really lean into what makes us unique as humans.
I mean, I kind of think of the moment where we historically transitioned computers from literal people who were called computers because they would compute massive amounts of data by hand on a sort of piece of paper to like a machine technology that did that. And like, did we become dumber as a human, like as a human species or something like that? I don't think so. I think what it ended up doing was freeing up time so that we could like understand the basics of what's happening, but then be able to calculate like massive spreadsheets of data that allow us to like find new patterns and technologies and stuff like that that we could have never done before. And so I think similarly in learning and education, we need to figure out like what's that unlocking thing that can happen when we're using technologies in the right way. Um, and then there's one last misconception that I think is really pervasive, which comes from a good place, and it comes from an area like perspective of protection. How do we protect our kids, right?
Yep.
Which I think is totally reasonable because like we screwed up severely with social media. And there's some pieces, especially around like AI companion bots and things like that, where like I would not feel comfortable putting anyone's child in front of one, let alone adults, like in some cases, right? Like it's like I don't know, like that's we do not know enough about we know enough about the harm and not enough about the protection around that, right? But what that ends up causing is a bunch of people to go, we are going to hunker down. we are gonna like ban stuff. We're gonna treat it like cheating and those sorts of things, which like misses the point, right?
Hmm.
Like it's sort of like what we used to do with calculators at the beginning, right? Or even computers at the beginning, where English teachers like, oh, you can't bring like a laptop or a computer, a keyboard into an English class. Are you kidding me, right? And then now
Yeah,
you're like, wait, what do you mean? Like you're just typing on it. Like it's the same thing as writing, just in a different way, right? So I think there's a set of people who say they're like taking care of AI for their districts or their schools by having really harsh policies and dotting all those I's and crossing all those T's, which is not a bad thing to like protect kids and all that sort of stuff. But then they stop there and they
right.
like never go. And so what's the positive that we can do here?
Yeah,
And it
the
sets
both
everyone at a
and.
disadvantage.
Yeah, not just banning it, but how are we thinking about protection is good, just like skills are good, but it's not the end. We need to think about like what else we can do and how we can leverage these tools in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I say at the end of the day, I always tell people, I'm like, we don't ban kids from crossing the street, even though it's extremely dangerous. What we do is we, from a very young age, talk to them about it. We teach them how to do it. We hold their hand while crossing the street, et cetera, et cetera. We model for them how to wait for a walk symbol and all that sort of stuff. And then eventually, when they're old enough, we're like, hey, all right, time for you to do it. And if they screw up, what do? We go and hold their hand again for a little while to keep it going. And then eventually they learn how to look both ways before they cross. And I think the same thing with AI has to happen, where we need to teach our kids to be discerning with it, as opposed to, fearing it or not engaging with it.
Absolutely. And like you said with social media, we have not done that. We've just let kids dive right in. We have overly, supported them in life and coddled them in too many ways and then just given them like full access on social media and it's scary what exists there. And I agree. People are fearful, understandably, but we
Yep.
need to yeah, I like that crosswalk analogy. I'd never thought about it that way. All right. I want to like take us into the future as we're closing up here. So, yes, there are some challenges. Yes, there are some things that we're dealing with. But where are we headed? If you could, make visible your thinking about this truly learner-centered H3 school or system in the next 10 years, like what are we designing into and how do we take steps to move closer to that today?
For sure. So I think the sort of core first step is that we need to admit what we already believe, which is that schools are playing a bigger function than content delivery. And when we believe that schools, as Learner Studio would say, like the job of education is to inspire and prepare young people for life, career, and democracy in the age of AI for their individual and the common good. When we center that as our North Star, everything we do changes, right? Everything we design, every structure we build changes. And we should be working on tweaking and moving those structures in order to enable that goal, right? So, for example, it causes us to rethink the when, where, why, and how of schooling, right? Like, do you only learn in a school building? Like, do you only get prepared for democracy in a school building? Do you only get prepared for being in your community in a school building? No, right? So why don't we capture that learning? Why don't we encourage it? Why don't we engage in it and bring people like essentially like remove the walls of schools in a lot of positive ways so that kids can be really actively connected with their neighborhoods, their communities, with the world and that sort of stuff, right? I think it changes how we think of educators in the classroom, right? Because the educator is no longer this like person who has perfected life, career, and democracy in the same way they might have really learned math or how to teach social studies, right? But instead, they become a facilitator of a young person's journey towards what they want in life, right? And everyone's journey is a little bit different. And so we can actually support that with the new tools and things like that we have, right? um, I think it changes how we think about, I mean, literally every aspect of the system, from the grade band batching of kids to grades themselves. Like, what do grades mean, right? When like my kid comes home with a 90, I don't actually know what that means. Because
Right.
I'm like, and then like their progress report has this like letter grade, and I'm like, some other kid has the same letter grade, but they could have a totally different experience of what they know and don't know compared to you,
Right.
or what skills they have. And so I would sort of approach this in two ways of like how do we get there, right? In my mind, learning from my experience in Gwinnett, there needs to be a sort of like 1% every single day improvement sort of routes to get there, right? So it's like, hey, I don't need you to convert your entire system tomorrow, right? What I need you to do is every new decision you make, ask the question of, is it getting me closer to preparing young people for that future we talk about, or is it not? And if your answer is no, it's not, then like reconsider saying yes to that decision, right? And I think if we start doing that in just our regular day-to-day decisions, very quickly for kids, the entire outcome changes. Like everything they do changes. I think at the same time as that's going on, because like what is it, like 82% of kids right now, 84% of kids are in traditional public schools right now. I
Yep.
think we do actively need to build out the models of the future as well, where we're like testing out, trying out new things, showing what's going on. And there are a lot of really great schools and places already doing that as well, right? And so by having both and investing in both, I think we can move stuff forward in a really major way. And I just like, I don't see another way around it because this is what parents want. This is what young people want. This is what employers want. Like it's hard to disagree with everybody wanting the same thing.
Right. And it's the alignment on the vision and what we want to me is pretty clear. What that looks like and how we get there is causing anxiety for people and and people react to change differently. So as we've talked about,
Yeah,
you have people who cling to what was very tightly, people who are like, we're going all in and not really quite thinking about all the pieces. And then
yeah.
that middle majority who's like, I'm happy to do it. I just need the systems and structures to help me do that. And I think if we help educators, principals, superintendents, leaders in the system think about that 1% better and really anchor on that vision and interrogate their own systems, we can move much faster. But we have to kind of get in that mentality of we are evolving, we are shifting our systems, and we gotta let go of some of these old ways.
I mean, so yes to that. And at the same time, I've discovered that the change framing for individuals doesn't work because people don't want to change.
No,
Because
they
when you
don't.
say you need to change, it means you have to stop doing something or like you were doing something wrong before. I think the framing that's worked the best out there that I've seen has been people who are like, we're actually just doing what we've always wanted to do.
Yes,
Like we're
100%.
actually just improving upon the thing we already believe in, is based in our existing values, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not like everyone is moving to the exact same new model,
Mhm.
which is the problem with our current system where everyone's trying to be industrially put into the same exact model. We're like, hey, it's going to look a little different for different people. And that's okay. Like that's by design because people need different things in order to succeed in their lives. So
Yeah,
hopefully between the frame of like, this is just embracing what we already believe and the reality that it needs to look different in order to support kids in how they want to be supported,
right.
um, we can get somewhere together.
Totally. And people don't want to change themselves, but they want systems to change, right? We
100%.
usually
Absolutely.
say the system, I don't want that, it's broken. The system needs to change, right? But like and so we wrestle with that a lot too. But that's why I think of like getting back to what we want for kids is
Yeah.
such a unifier across all these communities. In a world where we think everything is so polarized, and it is, I have I continue to see a lot of alignment around what we want for kids, what we want for their future. And so continuing to like lean in on that and
Yeah.
figure out like how do we just make that more true every day.
And yes, and in reality, we are polarized, but if you actually look at what we're polarized on, it's like 1% of issues.
Mhm.
And not the other 99%, right? Like, for example, there was a time where a parent came to me, they're very upset about the sex education curriculum in Gwinnett, right? And like, I get it, very hot button issue. And I asked the parent, how much of the kids' curriculum experience do you think this is? And she's like, oh, it's like months of the experience. And I'm like, actually, we're talking about a 2 hour lesson in the context of an entire school year, which is in the context of 13 years of education. And the person's like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, so we just spent like 90% of our time talking about this one thing when like, and I'm not discounting this, an important thing to care about and that sort of stuff. But there's like literally 99.9% of the rest of the day we haven't discussed. And I think there's a whole lot of stuff we can improve there. So, anyways, I say all that to say that I think there's widespread agreement. I think there's a lot of people who are doing really great things. There are amazing proof points out there already. in big systems and little systems, rural and urban and suburban and private and public and charter and all those sorts of things. We just have to let them thrive, right?
That's right. All right, I'm going to finish off with some rapid fire set
All
of
right,
questions.
let's do it.
What is one thing we should stop doing in education?
I think we should stop centering only content. I think if we started centering, realizing that a kid is more than just content knowledge and they include skills, it would change up so much stuff for us.
I love it. What's one thing we should start doing?
I think we're one of the things we try and do in our current system is we like label kids as like, oh, you're in special ed or you're gifted or you're whatever. Um, I actually think like every kid should have an individualized education plan. This because everyone has a special need. Everyone has their gifts. Everyone has their, whatever their quirks are. And I think we would do incredibly well if we started seeing kids as individuals once again and not as like this like generic robot that we pour knowledge into.
I love it. What should we keep doing?
What should we keep doing? One thing that brings me heart all the time, and we saw this in the pandemic, we saw it before, we see it after, is that our educators on average really deeply love and care for our kids. And that includes even the superintendents who get caught up in politics and stuff, right? When you hear the stories of superintendents taking care of kids that aren't their own, like going out of their way to go to a funeral, to a baseball game for kids that they don't even know, like we have some really caring adults and people in our systems, and we need to keep that part going. When we lose that, we lose the whole game. And so hopefully we can keep on inspiring our adults to like love on children the way they have been.
Awesome. What's something that you are focusing on learning for yourself right now?
So I have created my own AI bot that is I'm calling Babak AI right now. And I'm learning how a lot of people come to me for advice on how to transform like school systems towards like in the AI arena. Like, what do we do? What do we think about? What's our strategy and that sort of stuff? And 9 times out of the 10, it's the same questions every time. But I can't reach everyone because I'm just one guy. So I've been training up and learning how to train up a Babak AI model that can like answer superintendent's questions around AI readiness, strategy, thinking about it as a school system leader. And I've tested it out actually on my wife, who's also an educator. And she said, Balak, this is totally creepy. Because it like even kind of jokes in the way you do. It sounds like you. It's not oral, it's all text-based. But she's like, I would imagine you're like texting me right now as it's coming on. So like I trained it on a bunch of my stuff to be able to do that. And so yeah, so I'm learning a lot about how to automate pieces of me so they can just get more good stuff out there to the world, like for free, like just to help everybody out.
That's cool. I can't wait to test it out.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Like I'm waiting, like the capabilities keep improving, which is great.
Awesome.
So one step at a time.
All right, a couple more. Do you have a favorite quote or saying that just like you come back to often?
Yeah, so J. Alvin Wilbanks, the superintendent in Gwinnett, used to say, um, there are two types of people in our school system, teachers and those who support teachers. And then sometimes when we weren't doing our jobs well, he'd say, and I don't have a third type of person, right? And it's a great reminder of like, if we're not supporting what's going on in the room between adults and among kids, like we've lost focus. Like whenever we're yelling, we're usually not yelling about that interaction, we're yelling about politics. And so I love that quote. It's like something I think about all the time.
I love that too. And man, that's he sounds like a really exceptional leader.
Remarkable man, absolutely.
Wow. Last two. What are you grateful for right now?
I'm like deeply grateful for the good people in my life. Like there are just so many people who have just been there at the right moment, right? Whether it's a tender moment or a joyful moment, it's just wonderful. Like you just I've been so blessed with so many great people that you learn from, you hang out with, that push you, that prod you, that make you question why you did something in good ways and bad ways, right? Like I'm just so thankful to be a human being alongside other human beings.
I love that. Last one. Bring it home with your hope for the future of education.
I think we're at a turning point right now where people are getting fed up with not only what we're doing, but our dialogue around education, because it's not productive. It's not pushing us forward. Like all the mess you hear on any, pull up almost any school board meeting anywhere, and you hear a whole bunch of mess that has nothing to do with kids being ready for their future. And I think people are getting to a place where they're like, I'm sick of that. Like, I don't want that anymore. Like, I want people who are constructively building a future for our kids. And so that brings me a whole lot of hope because I've seen people going, like, just like cutting past all the old cobwebs and all the old divides and going, hold on, let me ask that question. Is this good for kids? And is this preparing kids for their future? And when they're answering yes, they're willing to go with it, whether or not it used to align or not align to like any particular ideology. Because at the end of the day, our ideologies are only as good as how much they help us help each other, right? And so I've been very, very hopeful because I've had all sorts of people reach out in different ways to partner on different things, and I'm like, heck yeah, like let's do this together. So it brings me a lot of hope. There's going to be more tension for a little while, but I think we're about to turn the corner.
I love it. Well, this was such a great day to kick off my Thursday morning. I am so grateful for you, your perspective, and just having a little conversation about what's possible. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, thank you, Katie, for all your leadership and really pushing the sector forward and getting people to recognize that our goals are within reach. And there's ways to actually do that. We just have to do them. So I appreciate you for that and for your friendship as well.
Thank you.